Hey everybody, today I want to talk to you guys a little bit about how to properly set up and adjust a bandsaw so that it cuts straight, the blade doesn't fall off the front or the back of the wheel, and it should be a pretty simple, quick process. All right, first of all, this bandsaw is a 14-inch bandsaw. It's pretty standard. That means it's 14 inches across. The blade length is 93.5 inches, which is really standard for a 14-inch bandsaw. This particular blade is 3/8 of an inch across. There's 4 teeth per inch, so TPI. So when you order a blade, or if you need to replace a blade, quite often they will tell you the length. In this case, it's 93.5. They'll tell you the width, which in this case is 3/8. And then they'll tell you the TPI, teeth per inch. 4 to 6 TPI is pretty normal. If you use your bandsaw regularly for thicker wood or longer, straighter cuts, wider blade's better. If you use your bandsaw for some smaller, more intricate cuts, maybe a 1/4 inch blade, but you really have to gauge that to your use and the radius of curves you're going to be cutting. All right, so first of all, we made sure this is unplugged. The next thing we have to do, if the blade isn't already off, is we have to take it off. So some machines, you'll tension it up here with this knob, right here, and other machines like this Powermatic have this quick release. So occasionally, if you're set for something thicker, it won't loosen it up quite enough. If you're set for, on this machine, if you're set for a 1/4 inch blade, it works out pretty well. So we're going to go through the whole process, taking it off, putting it back on, just to give you guys a good example of what this looks like. There's a throat plate in here. Quite often you'll have to reach to the underside. It's the throat plate. Take the blade out, raise this guard up a little bit. Okay, so with the blade, the only thing you have to be careful of when you put this on is that you put it on in the right direction, because it's wound up in a smaller circle when you get them. You got to make sure the blade is pointing, the teeth are pointing towards you and down. Okay, when you unwrap the blade, if you do it wrong, it could be inside out, right? So you could have the teeth pointing towards you, but the teeth are going up at an angle. That's bad. So if that happens, just inside out, get it going in the proper direction, and we're ready to put this on. So slide it in. Now, up top and down below, there's all kinds of bearings or bushings that help align the blade. And I'll bring you guys in a little bit closer here in a second to show you what I mean by that. So we're going to have to align those. Okay, you want the blade to go in between these 2 bearings or bushings, depending on what your machine has. Same thing on the bottom. They're pretty much identical, just upside down when compared to each other. Okay. So now we will go ahead and tension this. Now, most machines have a gauge on the back of it, and the gauge has measurements ranging. In this machine, it ranges from 1/8 to 3/4. That's the width of the blade. So because this was a 3/8 blade, which is a little wider than this automatic tensioner can handle, it currently says 1/4 inch, but I need to raise it up to 3/8. So you just tension it. As you're looking at the top, clockwise tensions it, counterclockwise will loosen it. So there we go. Now, that's all set. Now this has already been pretty well set up, but we're going to go through it anyhow. The next thing we'll have to adjust is the tracking on this, going backwards and forwards. And for that, I want to loosen up a couple of these bearings. One bearing on the top, one bearing on the bottom. There's one that rides behind the blade on the top and behind the blade on the bottom, so that when you're pushing your stock through, it doesn't push the blade off the back side of these wheels, because there's really nothing else that holds it on there. So why don't I give you guys a close-up view here quick. I'll just carry the camera up here and show you guys what I'm talking about, so that way you get a good idea as we go through and align all these. All right. So if we look here, you've got a bearing behind the blade right here. So if you're pushing back on this bearing will catch it. And you've got a bearing on each side that keeps the blade from going left to right. So those are the ones that we're going to be adjusting. On some machines, like this one, there's a bushing on each side. So instead of these being bearings that spin, it's a bushing. Okay. And the other thing that I will be talking about is how to tilt this wheel to track the blade back and forth. And that's done with this knob right here. Okay. On the jet, it's the same thing, same location. Almost all of them, it's the same location. And the tensioning gauge I was talking about, right there. Okay, there's a little red piece in there. All right. All right, back to it. All right, now that you kind of know what I'm talking about, what we're going to do is take that roller, that bearing that's behind, and remember, it's the same. There's the same setup down here. We're going to loosen that up. There's a little thumb screw. We're going to back it off just a little, and we'll back this one off just a little. All right, now we're going to take this. I'm going to loosen up our wing nut, not adjust the handle, but there's a wing nut, just locks it in place. I'm going to rotate this, okay? So right now, I saw it very quickly pop back into position, and it's not touching our bearings yet. And it's not moving. It's staying about in the center of our tire. Okay, the wheel is the metal part, the tire is the rubber part on the outside. So that's pretty good. If you tighten this, the blade will track towards the back. If you loosen up that knob, the blade will track towards the front. So just be careful. Don't stick your fingers in here and wheel it around. I keep my hand fairly flat and give it a spin and take my hand off so that I don't get my fingers stuck in there. All right, so that's tracking really nicely. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to take this bearing that's behind the blade on the bottom and the top and bring it in until it's just either barely touching or there's a sliver of a light, like a little piece of light going through there. You'd barely want to be able to put a piece of paper between that bearing and the blade. Okay, so we got that pretty well adjusted. I'm going to go ahead and tighten it up. Now, what we have to do for these side bearings right here, you don't want the bearings to be on the teeth. You want them to be on the side of this blade, okay? These teeth tilt one way, the other way, one way, the other way, one way, the other way. That allows it to cut out a little bit wider piece of wood than the thickness of the blade. That's the kerf. Now, you don't want those bearings to ride up in there and take the set out of the blade. The set is the tilt of the teeth. So, we'll adjust them back so that the front side of these bearings or bushings is either even with or just behind the gullet. That's the little valley between the teeth. For this one, you have to use an Allen wrench. We're going to loosen that up. A thumb screw. And we're pretty good right there. Okay, tighten up the thumb screw. The Allen wrench we loosened up because these bearings, they're on a cam. So I rotate it, it'll move either further away or closer. And you want the distance to be as close as possible. Again, you don't want to put tension on the blade, but think of it as a piece of paper should be tight fitting. So, get that adjusted. Okay, and then we'll tighten it up. And I've already done the bottom, so the bottom's already aligned. I'll double check it here. Well, I guess I could align one of them just a little bit. Never hurts to double check everything, just to make sure you're right there where you need to be. Tighten that up. All right, so that's all tight. We've got all three of the bearings or bushings on top and bottom adjusted. We'll put our throat plate back. We've got our tension adjusted and the blade is tracked properly. The only other thing that I want to check, I want to check the squareness. Okay, we'll move our guard assembly all the way up. And we are perfect right there. If you're not, there's two handles underneath here, so you can adjust this. I have a stop adjusted so that it seats back down and it should be right on, which, yes, it is right there. We're gonna lock it. So we're good. Now the blade should track perfectly straight. It should make nice straight cuts. The blade shouldn't wander around. Make sure that this guard is down fairly close, like within 1/4 of an inch of the top of whatever you're cutting. The purpose of that is, of course, the guides are close, so it'll keep the blade from wandering. But in addition to that, you don't have a lot of blade exposed, so you're not going to cut yourself. If you do all of this, and you're trying to cut a straight line, and the blade pulls hard to one side, the set of the teeth are out. So we'll discuss what that is and how that happens later, and what you actually have to do to fix it, or if you can do anything to fix it. Other than that, this saw is good to go. So if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below, and good luck.